It's been a special 24 hours, would you agree? Thank you. No, please clap. Please. Both as a philosopher and as an artist, I have been especially encouraged, inspired by the fact that here at this conference, we've been able to enjoy firsthand, as it were, live, great works of art. We had Henry Wingate unveil two beautiful paintings here late yesterday afternoon. We had James Matthew Wilson's wonderful original poetry being recited here this morning. We had the beautiful Mass set by Frank LaRocca and my colleague Kurt Poterak's choir. Beautiful, beautiful. We see a renaissance of the arts in Catholic culture happening here among us today. And that is a very privileged place for us to be. And I know that I am just very happy to be here because of that, and I hope you are too. So it's a special day. But yet, while we should be inspired by this new spark of creativity that's been happening among Catholics recently, wouldn't you agree with me that there's still a long way for us to go, right? We have a little spark, but we need to fan that flame, right? I practice the art of literature, so a lot of my examples this afternoon are going to be from the world of literature. Just as one window into where we are as a culture, consider these statistics. From the years 1945 to 1965, the Pulitzer Prize in Literature was given to 11 Catholics. The National Book Award for Literature was given to 7 Catholics during that same time period. I'm counting the posthumous award that was given to Flannery O'Connor in 1972 for her collected stories. She died in 1964. They gave her the award later. So that's an amazing amount of recognition for Catholic writers. 60 years or so have passed since then. I'm afraid to say it doesn't seem that we've kept pace. And it's not that prizes are the most important thing. And I well know there's more than one reason for the drop-off in recognition of Catholic writing. The culture's changed just a little bit in the last 60 years, wouldn't you agree, right? Catholics, too, we have to shoulder some of the blame. I think, were a little intimidated with the seismic changes in our culture that began especially in the 1960s, and we withdrew from major centers of artistic creation. And we left the film industry and the television industry and the music industry kind of to do without us. And now we're getting a sense that we got to get back into the game a little bit. And that's good, but we've lost a good deal of ground. So here's the question I would like to pose with you here this afternoon. What would it take to fan the flames of the spark that we're experiencing here this weekend? What would it require to really enjoy a new renaissance in the arts made by Catholics? The answer that I want to propose is that just as much as the artist must play a role in that renaissance, you must play a role in that renaissance. You as father, you as mother, you as grandmother, you as grandfather, parishioner, citizen, business person, young professional making her way in the world. We all have to shoulder the responsibility for this renaissance. And what I hope to share with you this afternoon is what I take to be the unrecognized secret for your success in helping make that renaissance happen. What we want at the end of the day, my colleague Kathleen Sullivan was talking about Flannery O'Connor. I can't resist. That's Flannery O'Connor's desk at her house in Chawton, Hampshire. That little octagonal desk is shoved into the corner of a sitting room. And she wrote 6 of the greatest novels in the English language sitting right there, right? No laptop, no printer. Yes, all by hand, multiple drafts. Where's our Jane Austen today? Why can't we seem to produce such writing today? And again, I'm just taking literature as one example, right? Or if we are producing that quality, why can't we produce more of it? So I'm picking up on the theme that my colleague Mark Wunsch raised this morning, this Pentecostal theme. We've been talking about beauty all day, but now we want to think, okay, how can we take our renewed understanding of what beauty is out into the world to set it afire? What are the cultural changes that we need to see? What are the social changes that we need to see in order to help develop new artists? Okay, so here's the secret I'd like to share with you, and I want to put it simply in this way. If we're going to encounter more beauty, we must encourage the beauty of encounter. If we're going to encounter more beauty, we must encourage the beauty of encounter. So, what do I mean by encounter? It's a synonym for the word experience. I want to focus your minds on this notion of experience. What is an experience? An experience occurs, a good experience at least, a beautiful experience, when we unite ourselves to some lovable particular. When we unite ourselves to some lovable particular, that's when we have an experience. So an experience is not an idea. It's not an algorithm. It's not a concept. It's more like a concert, in the sense that it is live, it's in performance. It is multiple people coming together into communion. So an experience can be what we're doing right now, thinking and talking and laughing and dining together here at Christendom for the weekend. It could be coffee with a friend. It could be being at Mass. It could be thinking philosophically or enjoying a work of art. These are all experiences. Beauty is not principally an idea. It's an encounter. It's an experience. So what I am suggesting is that we need to build a culture of encounter, of experience. Okay, I hear what you're thinking. You're thinking, McInerny, this sounds kind of squishy. This sounds kind of warm and fuzzy. Don't you listen to the news? The world's a dumpster fire, and you're here talking about having coffee with people. Well, the world is a dumpster fire in many ways. But again, I'm going to stand my ground, and I'm going to bring out the big guns to help me support my arguments. So I first want to bring out one of our great heroes here at Christendom College, St. John Henry Cardinal Newman. This is one of the most famous passages in all of his works. Has a formidable title, An Essay in Aid of a Grammar of Assent. But in the midst of that work, Cardinal Newman says this: the heart is commonly reached not through reason, but through the imagination, by means of direct impressions, by the testimony of facts and events, by history, by description. Persons influence us, voices melt us, looks subdue us, deeds inflame us. Many a man will live and die upon a dogma. No man will be a martyr for a conclusion. No one, I say, will die for his own calculations. He dies for realities. I take it there that Cardinal Newman is talking about encounter. He's talking about experience. And it's an experience I like to call poetic experience, but don't get me wrong, it's not just about poets or for poets or about writing poetry or reading poetry. It's a poetic use of the word poetic. By poetic experience, I simply mean it's an experience of the beautiful, where you have that lovable encounter with some particular in the world. Cardinal Newman's point is that it's only in such encounters that our hearts are moved, and that we won't go out to change the world. Okay. Maybe Cardinal Newman isn't enough for you, so I'm going big now. I'm going to Pope Benedict XVI. Now, in this passage, Pope Benedict is also going to talk about poetic experience, though he's going to add a twist that we don't quite see in that passage from Newman, and that is poetic experience, it's not squishy. It's not just a warm and fuzzy feeling. It's knowledge. It's real knowledge of reality. Poetic experience of the beautiful leads to truth, the central theme of our conference. This passage comes from a wonderful document from Pope Benedict XVI. If you don't know it, you could read it in about 12 minutes. You can find it online easily. It's called The Feeling of Things. Notice the title, The Feeling of Things, the Contemplation of Beauty. And it's a talk he gave to the group Communion and Liberation back in 2002. And here's what Pope Benedict writes. Being struck and overcome by the beauty of Christ, so of course, being the vicar of Christ, he's going to talk about the poetic experience of union with Christ, first and foremost. But he writes, being struck and overcome by the beauty of Christ is a more real, more profound knowledge than mere rational deduction. Of course, we must not underrate the importance of theological reflection, of exact and precise theological thought. It remains absolutely necessary. But to move from here to disdain or to reject the impact produced by the response of the heart in the encounter with beauty as a true form of knowledge would impoverish us and dry up our faith and our theology. We must rediscover this form of knowledge. It is a pressing need of our time. That's what's pressing me to come before you today. This pressing need to be aware of and to cultivate poetic knowledge, poetic experience as real knowledge. This is the secret that will help form the culture of beauty that we all, I know, so much want to see. It's a pressing need of our time, in particular, because we are living in what the author Neil Postman calls a technopoly. Not a monopoly, but a technopoly. I don't have time to argue this afternoon. I'll simply assert it. In a technopoly, you have technology, obviously, but it's not just there. It's not just a distraction or even a major distraction. In a technopoly, technology is running a tyranny. So that every major institution of culture is encased, you might say, dominated by technology and technological modes of thinking. Right? And we see it everywhere. We see it in our homes as we have daily wrestling matches with the smartphone or the smart screen. You see it in schools where education has to fight with intrusions of laptops and other forms of technology. You even see the poor stars in Hollywood having to fight to maintain the rights to their own faces, their own voices, which AI is now able to replicate in such a way that they can use a great actor's face and voice without permission of that actor. technopoly can take over our bodies. So life in a technopoly makes living poetic experience extremely difficult. I think that's why Pope Benedict says it's the pressing need of our time. Technological modes of thinking, above all, it's not just the gadgets themselves, but they put us in a frame of mind and a mode of attention where we are always breaking things down into parts. And then we're manipulating the parts according to some preference of our own. So the transgender ideologies is a great example of that. We'll even take the human body as just an assemblage of parts, and we'll break it down into parts, and then according to our own preferences, we'll put the parts back together in a new way, or we'll add some parts, right? That's a technological mode of thinking, and yeah, people use some gadgets in order to bring that about. Technopoly is everywhere. We're immersed in it. But that is the environment in which we are called to create great works of beauty. Now, we want to be careful. Last night, Dale Aquis gave a great talk. Very great talk. You quoted Chesterton. And Chesterton was talking about poetic experience. He didn't use the phrase. But he talked, didn't he, Dale, about the kind of the two globes of the mind? He was talking about sort of that part of our brain, as we often say, the left brain, that is more calculating, that is more utilitarian, that loves to break things down into parts, that loves to analyze. That's what the word analyze means. It means to break things down into parts, manipulate the parts, create new things, be useful. That's the left side of our brain, or what I prefer to call left hemisphere modes of thinking. We also have this right hemisphere mode of thinking, which is the more intuitive, the more imaginative, the more holistic, the more interpersonal and communal. This is the mode of thinking that's more attuned to poetic experience. So I'm advocating poetic experience, but I'm certainly not saying that left hemisphere modes of thinking are evil in and of themselves. I think technopoly has lots of problems with it, but there's nothing wrong with wanting to use our minds to make the world a better place, even in material terms. So we don't want to denigrate foolishly left hemisphere modes of thinking, but we need to integrate better than we do in technopoly the left and the right hemisphere modes, calculation and imagination. I like this metaphor. Here's Fred and Ginger. I take Fred Astaire to stand in for right hemisphere modes of thinking, and I take Ginger Rogers to stand in for left hemisphere modes of thinking. Ideally, it's a dance between the two modes. It's not one or the other. We don't have to choose. We need both, but they dance. But a dance between two partners, at least in a dance as elegant as this, needs a leader. The leader must be the right hemisphere mode of thinking. Or I would say the leader must be poetic experience, the poetic encounter. That way of attending to the world must guide the more calculating mode of the intellect, or else we fall into the tyranny of technopoly. Isn't it interesting? Weren't we talking about the metaphor of the dance last night with Chesterton too? I mean, how do we often dance today? We don't dance an elegant choreography like Fred and Ginger. We dance so often in the mosh pit, and we're dancing singly, right? We're dancing singly. It's a very kind of left hemisphere mode of dancing. And if there's something of a partner there, the partner there is just to witness our prowess, right? All our funky dance moves. But Fred and Ginger, they dance together. Left and right hemisphere mode, poetic experience, dancing with the calculative. It's wonderful. To encounter more beauty, we must encourage the beauty of encounter, of poetic experience. But I want to go into this a little more deeply by taking you through a series of 3 encounters. Don't panic, very briefly. 3 encounters with 3 artists. And in these encounters with artists, I want to see more particularly poetic experience at work, building culture, building the culture of beauty that we're talking about. Okay. As we do this, I want to touch on something Kathleen Sullivan said this morning in her wonderful talk on Pride and Prejudice. Kathleen, where are you? Give it up for Kathleen Sullivan. She was great today. Kathleen drew upon St. Thomas Aquinas in finding the beauty within a particular novel, Jane Austen's masterpiece, Pride and Prejudice. And she found 3 characteristics of beauty in that novel, right? And they've come up more than once in our discussion today. Wholeness, harmony, splendor. There are different translations of those terms. Those 3 terms in St. Thomas's Latin are integritas, integrity, unity. I'm using wholeness. Consonantia could be harmony. Last night we were using the word proportion as a translation of that. And then finally, St. Thomas, he'll alternate between claritas, clarity, but sometimes he'll use the Latin word splendor, which we take right into English as splendor. So again, the 3 characteristics of beauty, there will be a quiz at the end, you don't want to leave without this: wholeness, harmony, splendor. You know what's interesting about St. Thomas's discussion of those 3 characteristics? They don't occur in a work on beauty. St. Thomas wrote no work on beauty. Search high and low, you won't find it. Whenever St. Thomas Aquinas talks about beauty, it's always as an aside. He's always focused on something else. And when he names the 3 characteristics of beauty, you know what he's talking about? He's talking about the Trinity. It's in the first part of the Summa. And he's talking about the Trinity. And don't think that the 3 parts of beauty line up with the 3 persons of the Trinity. That's not how he sees it. The 3 characteristics of beauty are all concentrated in the Son, in the second person of the Trinity, the Logos. The locus of intelligibility is what is whole, harmonious, splendorous. And we were saying last night, weren't we? Going back again to Dale's wonderful talk, a baby's face is the most beautiful thing in the world. It's certainly the most beautiful thing in the material cosmos. And isn't it interesting that on the highest levels of theology, the most beautiful thing is a son, is the Father's only begotten Son? I'm way above my pay grade here, but it seems that there's got to be some connection between the beauty of the Son and the beauty of the child. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. As we go through this tour, we're going to see these 3 characteristics of beauty: wholeness, harmony, splendor, building culture, so that culture itself is beautiful. And I'm not speaking in Hallmark card language, metaphorical language there. I mean, literally, culture can be beautiful, whole, harmonious, splendorous. Let's begin with Gerard Manley Hopkins, 1884, 1889. Convert to the Catholic faith, much to the consternation of his family. Cardinal Newman, as a matter of fact, was pivotal in his conversion. Became a Jesuit priest. Died relatively quite young, wrote much poetry, pretty much none of it published in his lifetime. If you ever get a chance to read Hopkins' journals, you see a great example of poetic experience in action, and especially of wholeness. Because Hopkins, he puts such wonderful attention on the smallest things. And it is an example to us of how to live poetically. Let me just give you a snippet here. I'm looking at his journals here for 1873, May 11th, so it's spring. And Hopkins writes this: bluebells in hotter wood, all hanging their heads one way. I caught as well as I could while my companions talked the Greek rightness of their beauty, the lovely, what people call gracious bidding one to another or all one way, the level or stage or shire of color they make hanging in the air a foot above the grass, and a notable glare the eye may abstract and sever from the blue color of light beating up from so many glassy heads, which, like water, is so good to float their deeper in-stress in upon the mind. Isn't that beautiful? That close noticing is what's characteristic of poetic experience and gives us a sense of wholeness. I want to say just one more word. What do I mean by wholeness? On a material level, if I talk about you all as a whole, well, you're something that I can count. I can count the number of people that are in here. I can count the number of objects in the room. And I can get some sense materially of a whole. But that's pretty superficial. Because if I really want to know what you are as a whole, I have to have some understanding of the point of your being here. I have to grasp, as we philosophers say, what's essential to you as a group here today. And I would understand, hey, you're here for a conference on beauty. That is the point of your being here today. And when I grasp that point, I grasp a whole. Gerard Manley Hopkins is, in his journal, attempting to grasp the whole of something very small, but very beautiful, these bluebells. He's trying to get, in that passage I just read, to the point of what it is to be a bluebell. Now, that kind of close noticing doesn't have to take place in nature. It often does. But you can do this while looking into the beautiful baby's face. You can do this while reading a novel. You can do this sitting across a coffee table, having an intimate conversation with a friend. This kind of close noticing is always available to us, but we have to attend to it. And this is what technopoly makes so difficult. Because what happens to us these days when we want to closely notice the bluebells? Our dopamine IV drip gives us a little signal, and we get distracted by the technology, right? And even when we don't give in to the technology, we feel that urge to it because we get addicted to it. Right? So we have to form habits of attention so that we can experience this wholeness. My friends, I want to propose to you that this kind of attention is at the very basis of culture. Another great hero of ours here at Christendom, Joseph Pieper, says that leisure is the basis of culture. He doesn't mean a nap on the hammock on a Sunday afternoon. He means this kind of contemplative seeing of the whole, of the point of things. That is where culture is built. It doesn't begin with the bricks and mortar. It begins with how you see the world. And it was with that kind of attention that Gerard Manley Hopkins was able, several years later in 1877, to go to his desk and write, "Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of coupled color, like a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, for fresh fire coal, chestnut falls, finch's wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow, plow, and all trades, their gear and tackle and trim. All things counter, original, spare, strange, whether fickle or freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle dim, he fathers forth, whose beauty is past change. Praise him. Pied Beauty by Gerard Manley Hopkins, a sonnet written 1877. You don't get that little nugget of beauty without that kind of noticing of the whole. So we're seeing the beginning of culture being built. Let's take a look at our second characteristic of the beautiful. I'm going to go past Stephen Lenoir. We're going to go to our friend Flannery O'Connor, great Catholic writer of the 20th century, 1925, 1964. She's strong meat. Don't panic if you're not her greatest fan. We can still learn from her as an artist for our purposes today. Flannery O'Connor, when she was in her late 20s, contracted a disease known as lupus that her father had and her father died of quite early in life. And so she was forced, from where she was living then in New York City, to come back to her widowed mother's farm outside Milledgeville, Georgia, a farm they called Andalusia. And she spent approximately the next 10 years of her life being cared for by her mother and writing in this farmhouse. O'Connor, to my mind, is a great example of the second characteristic of beauty, harmony. Not just in her works, we could find it there, just as we found wholeness and harmony in Pride and Prejudice, but I mean in the way that she lived her life and the way she built culture around her. There was a harmony of the parts of culture. Now, Flannery O'Connor had the advantage of institutions that were designed to help foment poetic experience and poetic craft. She went as a graduate student to the Iowa Writers Workshop. She earned an MFA, a Master's in Fine Arts, in creative writing. She started to publish her short stories even while still a student. After that, she went to the Yaddo artist community in New York. She got a little grant to kind of live in this beautiful place and just write. So she had what Henry Wingate was talking about in his remarks last evening. She had masters to apprentice herself to, and that is absolutely necessary for the artist. And notice you already have harmony being forged. When the apprentice sits before the master, you have parts, as it were, being brought into harmonious relationship. And out of that relationship comes the poetic experience, comes the beautiful work of art, right? Artists don't just fall out of the sky. They need to be nurtured by culture. But then in turn, once she had served her apprenticeship, Flannery O'Connor began to give back, and she began to build culture out of her own poetic experience. This is her bedroom, which was also her office in Andalusia. So you have here her bed, crucifix, of course. You see the crutches that she had to use, suffering from lupus. And this was her writing desk right there. They had a second floor. There is a second floor in the house, but she couldn't get up those stairs. So she had to write in the room where she slept. It must have been pretty claustrophobic. This is a closer look at that desk. You see the old typewriter on which she worked, right? She has the Blessed Virgin there, some holy water, right? She didn't have a lot of energy in the last 10 years of her life, but she would spend about a couple hours every morning writing fiction. But what I don't want you to do is think of this as just a solitary occupation. I don't want you to think of Jane Austen in her desk in Chawton as just this solitary experience that she had. Because from that desk, Flannery O'Connor built community. How so? Well, she in turn served as the master to other young writers. She was constantly being asked for advice from young people, either by letter or just driving up the driveway of Andalusia and knocking on the door. She contributed to literary publications, so making connections with other cultural institutions. She contributed to thought journals in the Catholic world. She had just enough energy to travel a little bit to give talks at Catholic colleges around the country. She gave a talk at Notre Dame, for example, and other places. She did that to earn money to help support her family, but she also did it to contribute to the intellectual life of those institutions. So see all that. Already you see culture being formed, right? Literary institutions, academic institutions, her own family. All the while, she is contributing to her own parish in Milledgeville. She and her mother were daily communicants, right? So the most important institution in her life, the church, was very much driving all this cultural activity, all coming out of and at the service her poetic experience as a writer. The beauty of culture. Okay, our third stop on our quick tour. Let's go over to England. Let's go to Oxford in particular. We'll go to Broadmoor Road in Oxford, the home of J.R.R. Tolkien, 1892 to 1973. We've taken a brief look at wholeness, harmony, now splendor. If you think of splendor, you think of kings and queens. That's what I think of anyway. I think of their elegant robes, the colors of them, a lot of primary colors, the brightness, the sheen. We're attracted to splendor even on a material level. Right? What is the most splendorous thing in our lives? Well, it's going to be another king, right? It's going to be our Lord in the Eucharist. The host doesn't look like too much, but we know that theologically it is magnificent. And even again on a material level, you put it in a beautiful gold monstrance and it's marvelous, right? It's like you're in the presence of a king with a crown, with the robes, splendor. A great work of art will have that splendor. It will shine materially, but it'll also shine to our intellects. And on the cultural level, we need splendor. We need the wholeness that comes with that act of poetic attention. We need harmony between cultural institutions, but we need the splendor at the very heart of the work, and that will come ultimately from the Eucharist. So let's go back. One day, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote a letter to his adult son, Michael. You may have heard this. It's a very long letter. Another advantage of not living in such an advanced digital world is people took the time to write handwritten letters and really express their thoughts. I mean, it's just amazing. And you can read Tolkien's letters in his collected letters. But here's a very famous passage from Tolkien's letter to his son. He says, "Out of the darkness of my life, so much frustrated, I put before you the one great thing to love on earth, the Blessed Sacrament. There you will find romance, glory, honor, fidelity, and the true way of all your loves upon earth, and more than that, death. By the divine paradox, that which ends life and demands the surrender of all, and yet, by the taste or foretaste of which alone can what you seek in your earthly relationships, love, faithfulness, joy, be maintained, or take on that completeness of reality, of internal endurance, which every man's heart desires. So, a culture of beauty is going to find its splendor principally from the Eucharist, and that is where Tolkien himself, found the spiritual energy to create the great works of fantasy that he created. Wholeness, harmony, splendor. So now I want you to ask yourselves, as you leave the formal part of our conference now, how is it that you're going to help build culture yourselves? How are you going to put these qualities of beauty into your own life? How are you going to incorporate the close noticing of a Gerard Manley Hopkins? That active attention. How are you going to forge the harmonious relationships that make for culture and especially artistic beauty? And how can we encourage the kind of radiance, splendor that makes all of that activity a great adventure? An adventure in service to a king. That's what we're called upon to do. I thank you for being here this weekend. You've encouraged me, and I hope you have just a wonderful rest of the day today. Safe trips home. Thank you very much.